So when we talk about Form 4137, here is an overview I want you to pay attention to. So first of all, when we talk about this form, it's all about unreported tip income, right? And we are speaking about paying Social Security and Medicare taxes on that income. So I want you to look on the screen right now. So you put your first name, last name, you put your Social Security number, and you have to actually identify the places where you actually got tip income. And in other words, you haven't reported that income. So in our hypothetical example here, we have restaurant A, restaurant B. So again, this could be any place. I'm just for clarity's sake, for convenience sake, I'm just using the restaurant industry. But this can be applicable to all kinds of industries. Okay. So restaurant A, restaurant B, and you have to put the EIN of that organization where you got the tip income, and you have to put the total cash and the charge tips that you received. In our case here, we have a $1,000 for the first one and $500 for the second one. And so you have the cash and tips that you actually received, and the amount that you reported to your employer. So here we reported 750 and 250. So if you follow the math here on line 2, when you add 1,000 plus 500, you have 1,500. And line 3, you have $1,000. That's the amount that you reported to your employer. And if you follow the math here, line 4, you have 500. So when you actually subtract 1,000 from $1,500, you have $500. Okay. And if we move all the way to line 6, we have here $500 because that's what the math gets to. And line 7 here, we have made less than $160,000, $160,200. And so on line 8, you put your income for the year. And so line 9 comes to a negative $100,000. I mean, your situation might be a little different, but here, for sake of convenience, sake of clarity, we just use some round numbers. And if you actually line 11, if you actually if you multiply $500 times 6.2%, you have $31. And on line 12, you have $7.25. So the full amount here, we are speaking about $38.25. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. So here's the approach I want you to really pay attention to. So when we talk about Social Security and Medicare tax on unreported tip income, we are speaking about the transparency. We're speaking about like accountability, because the IRS wants you to pay your taxes on all kinds of income, including tip income. So it's one of those things where you have to separate the tip income that you have reported to your company and the income that you have not reported. Okay, that segregation has to be clear there. So what is the purpose of this form? So to really be clear. Now, it's important to really understand that when individuals receive tips, they are required by law to report them to their employer if the total tips received in a calendar year amount to $20 or more. So the threshold here is at $20. So if you actually receive less than $20, you don't have to report anything to your employer. But if you have anything above that, you have to report that. Okay. And the employer then includes those reported tips in the employee's wages and withholds the appropriate FICA taxes. And however, if an employee fails to report all the tips, or if the employer does not withhold FICA taxes on the reported tips, the employee is still responsible for paying the required Social Security and Medicare taxes on the underreported or unreported, not underreported, unreported tips. Okay, so this is where Form 4137 comes into play. So this is a form that allows individuals to calculate the additional FICA taxes owed on the unreported tips and report them separately from their regular wages. So using this form, individuals can actually accurately determine. So in your case, you are able to, if you use the form, you are able to determine the amount of FICA taxes you owe on your unreported tips, and you are able to thereby comply with tax laws. It's all about complying with tax liabilities, okay? So when we talk about the benefits of Form 4137, you have a constellation of benefits. So you are, first of all, compliance with tax laws. You don't want the IRS to actually knock on your door and initiate a series of audits. You avoid penalties. You have accurate Social Security and Medicare benefits. You have protection of future retirement benefits. You have improved financial records. You also have a reduced audit risk. This is important. And you also have peace of mind. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you to this topic. We are having a conversation about the Form 4137. So when we talk about Form 4137, actually, let's talk about eligibility here. So basically, who is eligible to file this Form 4137? Well, it really depends. Obviously, you do qualify to file this form if you are, let's say, if you receive tips in the course of your professional activities, right? There has to be a correlation between the tips that you are getting and your professional activities. So generally, employees who receive tips as part of their job are eligible to file Form 4137, but they have to meet the following criteria. So there are three criteria that the IRS actually abides by, at least follows, to see if the Form 4137 is applicable. So you must be employed in a tipped occupation. That's what I said before. There has to be a correlation between tipping or receiving tips and your occupation. So you must work let's say, an occupation where receiving tips is customary. So examples include wait staff, bartenders, bellhops, casino dealers, and taxi drivers. So that's the first criterion, employed in a tipped occupation. Second criterion, cash tips of $20 or more per month. So $20 is actually the threshold where, and again, earlier I said $20, but I didn't specify the time window. So we're speaking about on a monthly basis. So you must receive cash tips amounting to $20 or more per month from your job. This threshold applies separately to each job that you hold in a tipped occupation. So if you have 3 or 4 tipped occupations, the $20 is not applicable to all the 4, but it's applicable to every single one of them. And actually, the third criterion is that tips are not reported to the employer. Remember, the whole idea is to make sure that you comply with your tax obligations. So the tips received by you, the individual, should not have been reported to your employer or included in your regular wages. So if tips are already reported on your W-2, Form W-2, they do not need to actually be reported again on Form 4137. Let's talk about completing Form 4137. And the thing is that this is a straightforward form, nothing really complicated here. And so it's one of those things where you just want to be clear about what you're putting on that form. So you want to obtain the form. So, it's pretty straightforward. You can just do it on the IRS website. Just tap the Form 4137 to download the most up-to-date version of the form. And you want to gather the necessary information. We're speaking here about your name, first name, last name, social address, your employment information. So the name and address of your employers. So the employer who paid you the tips or the employers, and the tip income information. So here we are speaking about the total amount of unreported tips you received during the tax year. And step number 3 is pretty straightforward. So we're speaking about the tips themselves. And then step number 4, as you saw a little earlier, you need to calculate the Social Security and Medicare tax on the unreported tips, okay? And then in step number 5, you have to complete part 3, which is where we are speaking about computation of Social Security and Medicare tax. So here you have to, again, going back to the amount that you have unreported, you have to see what kind of a Social Security tax, FICA tax, and Medicare tax you owe on that amount. And part 4 is pretty straightforward also in terms of helping you with the allocation of tips. So the thing here is that if you have received allocated tips from your employer, you will need to complete part 4 And so this section is used to allocate the tips among the employees who receive them. And so last but not the least, don't forget to actually sign and date the form. So again, if you send anything to the IRS that is not signed and dated, they're not going to process your information. And so you want to make sure that you have all things pretty straightforward. And once you're done, just submit the form. And you can submit the form manually. You can submit the form via fax, or you can submit the form electronically. Everything depends upon your states of residence, but also it depends on your situation. And there are actually a tax software that allow you to file Form 4137 electronically. So this is kind of cool. Or if you have in your area an approved IRS e-file provider, you can actually file the form also that way. This is totally fine. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 4137, and I'm actually just explaining things to you in terms of the form itself. There are some special considerations that you have to keep in mind when we talk about Form 4137. First of all, we are speaking strictly about tip income reporting. Okay, you must report all tips received during the year, including both cash and non-cash tips. Tips can include amounts directly received from customers, as well as tips allocated to you by your employer through a tip sharing arrangements. And you also have to think about the earnings threshold. I spoke about there earlier, the $20. That's actually the threshold. And you also have to think about the employer allocation. So if your employer allocates tip to you, they should provide you with a Form W-2 that includes the allocated tip amount. And you need to report this allocated amount on Form 4137. And there has to be a data transfer between Form 4137 and 1040. So the total tip income, including both cash and allocated tips, reported on Form 4137 should also be reported on line 7 of a Form 1040. And this is really important. And one thing you need to also pay attention to here is that we are speaking also about the calculation of Social Security and Medicare taxes. And again, the whole thing is that you have to abide by your tax obligations. Remember that the combined Social Security and Medicare tax rate is 15.3. So we have a 12.4% for Social Security and 2.9 for Medicare. And you have to also make sure that you are paying taxes on your unreported tip income, right? It's all about making sure that the system is fair to everybody, that you're paying your fair share of taxes as well. And there is also a special consideration to think about. If you're a self-employed individual, basically, if you receive tip income, you don't need to file Form 4137. But what you have to do is that you should report your tip income and calculate the Social Security and Medicare taxes on a Schedule C or a Schedule C Easy of your Form 1040. So when we talk about the Form 4137, there are some cases where there could be mistakes. And I want to talk to you about some mistakes that you need to avoid when filing this form this year. First of all, you have to make sure that you are actually reporting all tip income. It's really crucial to report all tip income received during the tax year. And so failure to report all tips could actually result in underreporting and potential liabilities and potential penalties, if you will. And please keep accurate records. It's all about you see, the thing is, the burden of proof is on you. The IRS actually relies on you to be a good taxpayer citizen. So you have to, we are speaking about, you want to maintain records that include dates, amounts, and sources of tips. And so failing to maintain accurate records may lead to discrepancies and difficulties while filing Form 4137. And also make sure that you are correctly calculating Social Security and Medicare taxes. And don't miss the filing deadline. So we are speaking here about April 15th for most of the taxpayers. But it's always a great idea to double check the current year's deadlines to ensure compliance. And you also want to make sure that you are including the correct form with your tax return. So when we talk about Form 4137, primarily we are speaking about Form 1040 or 1040 SR. But again, you want to actually double check that you are including the correct form with your tax return to actually avoid processing delays or potential errors. And please, also, you want to sign the form. You want to sign and date the form, because otherwise the IRS is not going to process your information. So this is important. And also, you want to make sure that you are reporting other income correctly. We're not just speaking about the tip income, but all sources of income. See, the whole thing is when we talk about actually reporting your income, of course, you have your regular W-2 income, you have your tip income, but you might have on the side some side gigs, for instance, and other income. So it's all about making sure that you are actually putting all the data to the IRS to appreciate. The thing here is that when we talk about Form 4137, just think of it as a way for the IRS to make sure everybody pays their fair share of taxes, right? And so everything revolves around unreported tip income, not reported tip income, because reported tip income goes into your W-2, your regular W-2. But unreported tip income allows the IRS to account for that portion of a tip income that wasn't subject to tax. Remember, we're speaking here about 15.3%. We're speaking about 12.4% for Social Security and 2.9 for Medicare. So 15.3 when you combine the two. One thing I want to say here is that when we talk about the 4137 itself, it is a form that you have to file for all sources of income. In other words, if you have multiple jobs where you have unreported income, tip income, you will need to file Form 4137. It's a form that allows you to aggregate all your tip income and make sure that you are actually abiding by your tax responsibilities. One thing I want to say here is that Form 4137 is specifically used to report and pay Social Security and Medicare taxes on unreported tip income. It doesn't provide a mechanism for deducting expenses related to earning tip income. However, you may be able to claim deductions for eligible work-related expenses on your individual income tax return. And it's one of those things where you can let us know in the comment section about your specific situation. So one of our team members will get back to you based on your situation. Or even better, it's just better to consult a tax professional to kind of help you out. Okay, you can reach out to a CPA, to an enrolled agent, or to a tax attorney to kind of help you out in terms of questions regarding your Form 4137. Now, you might want to, given the cost of this sort of service, it's just better when you reach out to those professionals if you have significant unreported tip income. I mean, if you have like a $200 or $100, it's really not going to be worth it. But if you have thousands upon thousands of dollars in unreported tip income, then it might make sense to consider hiring a tax professional to kind of help you out. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let me do a quick recap here. So in today's conversation, I was just talking to you about Form 4137. So I give you the overview, the approach, and now the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.